Welcome back to New Zealand Property Insights. I'm Paul Roberts.
And I'm Debbie Roberts. We're the owners of Property Apprentice, and we're here to help you to navigate the New Zealand property market with facts, not just headlines.
Today, we're opening episode 22 with an in-depth analysis of the recently released June rental data from relocating.co.nz.
That's right. Anecdotally, a growing number of Kiwi homeowners relocating overseas are choosing to hold on to their properties, driving a significant 10% surge in new rental listings, although recent net migration figures indicate that we're starting to see more Kiwis coming back home again too. We'll also break down a warning from law enforcement and tenancy experts, analysing how landlords can protect their properties from organised crime syndicates through advanced tenant vetting without falling into discrimination traps. So let's get into it. Segment number 1, the rental buffer. Shifting stock, overseas footholds, and the Wellington supply squeeze. So kicking off this first segment with those newly released June 2026 rental market data from realestate.co.nz. The figures show that new rental listings rose by 10% year on year to reach 6,729 listings in June, representing a widespread lift across 15 of the country's 19 regions.
What makes this supply surge unique is the motivation behind it. A growing number of Kiwi families relocating overseas are choosing to rent out their homes rather than sell, allowing them to keep a strategic foothold in the New Zealand property market, or perhaps simply because they don't want to sell in the buyer's market. So let's look at the facts. New rental listings on realestate.co.nz rose by 10% year on year to reach 6,729 in June, with 15 out of 19 regions recording an increase in rental supply. The Wairarapa region recorded the largest annual increase in new rental listings, jumping 67.6%, followed by Southland up 32.8%, and the Central North Island up 28.2%. Nelson and Bays up 25%. In the major urban centres, new listings rose by 7.8%, in Auckland to 2,875 properties, by 14% in Canterbury to 735 properties, and by 6.8% in Wellington to 537 properties.
This increased supply has put a lid on rental growth, with the national average rent sitting at $635 a week in June, representing a minor decrease of 0.2% compared to June 2025. Coromandel recorded the sharpest decline in average weekly rent, falling 9.6% year on year, followed by Gisborne, down 4.2%, and Taranaki, down 3.5%. Easing the trend, the West Coast recorded the strongest annual weekly rent increase, up 6.2% to $459 a week, followed by Nelson and Bays, up 4.4% to $593, and Central Otago Lakes District up 3.3% to $854 a week. Canterbury's average weekly rent increased by 2.5% to $590, a trend consistent with the local property sales market, which hit an all-time average asking price high in June 2026. Wellington's total active rental stock fell by 25.7% year on year, dropping from 1,084 properties down to just 805, representing the sharpest stock contraction of any major region.
Despite this tight supply, Wellington's median rent only crept up by a minor 0.5% year on year to sit at $628 a week, indicating that local tenant demand has also eased. Realestate.co.nz executive Sarah Wood highlights that while rental prices are stable, this flat tracking is excellent news for household budgets, as other weekly expenses like groceries, power, insurance continue to rise. So this June data tells us a lot about the mindset of Kiwi property owners right now. Sarah Wood's point about relocating owners choosing to rent rather than sell is an interesting one. Maybe they'll come back, which I think a lot of Kiwis going to Australia have decided it isn't a grass is greener over there. It shows that even though people are heading overseas for career opportunities or lifestyle shifts, they still hold deep confidence in the long-term capital value of New Zealand residential land. They are unwilling to cut ties with the local market by turning their family homes into residential rentals. They create a buffer for local tenants while keeping their options open for when they eventually return.
It's a very practical strategy for those relocating. Selling your home while navigating a move to a new country can force you to lock in a transaction at a flat point in the cycle, which is really ideal. Keeping the property as a rental gives you a hedge against inflation and protects your capital. However, for those owners, it also means stepping into the world of residential property investment. You must ensure that you've got independent property management in place, understand your tax obligations, and ensure that the home is fully compliant with healthy home standards. Because even though it might have been perfectly okay for you to live in it, that does not mean that it's up to spec as far as putting a tenant in there goes.
Absolutely. And we have to talk about Wellington, which Sarah Wood rightly points out is one to watch. We're seeing Wellington's active rental stock contract by 25.7% is a substantial supply drop. In a normal market, that would drive rents up immediately. But because Wellington rents only grew about 0.5% to $628, it tells us that the local tenant demand has also softened in parallel. The public sector downsizing and economic cooling in the capital have clearly kept a lid on the rental prices.
It's a classic example of why you can't look at supply in isolation. Demand is the other half of the scale. But as Sarah Wood warns, this represents a coiled spring. If tenant demand in the capital begins to recover before active rental stock can rebuild, we will see swift upward pressure return to Wellington rents. For property investors, this highlights why you must focus on local data, not national figures. Rents are flatly stabilising nationwide, which is a great relief for tenant budgets, but the regional variations are where the real strategic opportunities often sit.
So segment 2, the vetting safeguard, organised crime risks, reference red flags, and the anti-discrimination balance. So for our second topic today, we're addressing the warning from law enforcement and tenancy experts regarding security at residential rental properties. Police seized 1,532 cannabis plants from 17 suburban rental properties across West Auckland, which were being operated as organised grow houses.
This has highlighted a potential risk for self-managing landlords who are often ill-equipped to spot organised criminal syndicates. We're examining red flags when tenant vetting, the dangers of a weak inspection process, and how to do rigorous checks without violating New Zealand's anti-discrimination laws. So let's have a look at the facts. Police recently seized 1,532 cannabis plants from 17 suburban West Auckland rental properties being run as organised grow houses. Several identical residential operations linked to organised crime groups have caught the attention of law enforcement, prompting police to urge landlords and property managers to be highly vigilant. Tenancy Advisory Director Serena Gibbon reports a rising trend in requests from self-managing landlords dealing with illegal drug activity and structural property damage. Landlords have a strict legal obligation to perform thorough due diligence on prospective tenants and can face severe financial liability for fire or structural damage if their property is converted into a grow operation.
Experts warn that self-managing landlords are often ill-equipped to deal with organised crime, making crucial property decisions while their vetting training wheels are still on. Standard 7-question reference checks and brief 5-minute phone calls with listed referees are increasingly criticised as an insufficient way to verify a tenant's true identity or history. Key reference checks, red flags include ID verification software being able to verify driver's licenses, and referees taking long pauses or struggling to answer simple, basic questions about the applicant. Tenancy experts have flagged instances where multiple applicants have listed same referees across different applications, but the referee's voice has changed from male to female across different phone calls.
It's a pretty good indication, isn't it? And to counter a weak inspection culture, focused solely on basic insurance compliance, landlords are advised to increase check-in frequencies, inspect sheds and roof cavities, and connect directly with neighbours who serve as local ears and eyes. The Tenancy Advisory warns against blanket discrimination, emphasising that landlords cannot reject applicants. I mean, this seems obvious, but it's unfortunate that someone has to point it out. You can't reject applicants simply because they've got an accent or an ethnic sounding name. Race Relations Commissioner Dr. Melissa Darby confirms that the Human Rights Act strictly protects renters from discrimination based on race, ethnic origin, nationality or family status, with Te Kāhui Tika Tangata Human Rights Commission handling formal complaints.
The sheer scale of the West Auckland operation, 1,532 plants across 17 suburban homes, is a wake-up call. These crime syndicates are deliberately targeting quiet, suburban rental-owned mum and dad landlords, who they might figure out were less likely to do rigorous checks than a professional property manager. Relying on outdated 7-question scripts and a 5-minute phone call with a listed referee is no longer good enough. If the referee hesitates or can't instantly answer a basic question about the applicant, or if the ID verification software fails, those are immediate red flags and you must investigate further.
Yeah, and what Serena Gibbons said about neighbours really hits the nail on the head. Most landlords don't have the direct contact details of the neighbours living next to their rental properties. But neighbours can be your best eyes and ears on the ground because they generally want their community to be safe. If you have a good relationship with them, they'll let you know if there's any strange activity, covered windows, vacancy, or suspicious chemical smells. Landlords need to be more proactive than just doing a lazy inspection that exists only to satisfy the bare minimum of an insurance policy. You've got to be more proactive, walk the boundary of the section, check the outbuildings and roof spaces, and look for any other red flags. I mean, in our experience, the neighbours have been the first ones to give us notification if a tenant disappears. You know, sometimes that's saved us a week or two before we might have followed up with them otherwise, or before the property manager might have noticed that something was wrong.
But we also have to talk about the discrimination risk that Serena Gibbon and Dr. Melissa Derby raised. When a specific crime ring gets heavy media coverage, there could be a dangerous tendency for the industry to overreact with a blanket skepticism towards anyone with an ethnic background. That is not only illegal under the Human Rights Act, but it is also completely unfair to the vast majority of great, hardworking tenants who deserve a fair chance.
Exactly. Vetting's about verifying factual individual records, not stereotyping. You treat every applicant with absolute professional fairness, but you run a rigorous data-backed due diligence process on everyone equally. My personal preference would be to use a property manager who does that for you, but that's just because I don't think property management's fun. You double check references, use proper ID verification software, and verify employment history. Professional property management isn't about guesswork, it's about structured risk mitigation. And if you don't have the time or tools to run those safely or efficiently or professionally, that's your signal to step back and let an independent professional protect your hard-earned asset.
That wraps up episode 22 of the New Zealand Property Insights. We've discussed shifting supply dynamics of the winter rental market and critical vetting strategies to protect your assets against crime syndicates.
If looking at all these long-term structural security and retirement changes has made you realise that you need a personalised financial plan, or you want to understand how to build your own buying rules in a changing market, our team's ready to help.
We invite you to join us in our next completely free online educational masterclass, How to Succeed with Property Investing. It's highly practical, data-backed session designed to show you how you can create wealth with property investing.
Absolutely no sales pressure and zero obligation because our company doesn't sell property, so you're not going to get any hard pressure sales tactics from us. And if you want to become a client, then we can help you by holding your hand right through the entire process with no expiry date. To register for one of our free events, go to propertyapprentice.co.nz or click on the link directly in our show notes below.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time. Hey there, want to stay on top of the latest property news and trends? Subscribe to the Property Apprentice podcast for weekly updates that will help you to navigate the market like a pro. We cover everything from insider tips to expert interviews, so you'll always be in the know. And don't forget to ring the bell and hit that subscribe button here on our YouTube channel for even more helpful content to boost your property journey. Check out the link in the description to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode. Happy investing.